What if I told you that a brilliant professor, fluent in 13 languages and considered a genius by his peers, was living with 26 life-sized dolls in a tiny apartment with his parents, and nobody suspected a thing? What if I told you these weren't dolls at all? Today's story will challenge everything you think you know about the line between genius and madness. It's about a man whose obsession with death began with a single, horrifying moment when he was just 13 years old. A moment that would shape the next 30 years of his life and lead to one of the most disturbing discoveries in Russian criminal history. But here's what will shock you the most. His own parents lived with him. They saw these dolls every day. They thought it was just a harmless hobby. By the end of this video, you'll understand how someone can hide in plain sight, how brilliance can mask darkness, and why sometimes the people closest to us are the ones we know the least. But first, let me tell you about a funeral that changed everything. Russia, 1979. 13-year-old Anatoly Moskvin is walking home from school when his path is blocked by something no child should ever have to witness: a funeral procession. But this isn't just any funeral. This is the funeral of 11-year-old Natasha Petrova, and what happens next will haunt Anatoly for the rest of his life, and eventually haunt dozens of families across Russia. According to Anatoly's own writings years later, he was physically dragged to the coffin. Adults forced his young face close to the corpse of this little girl, and then they told him to kiss her. Can you imagine? A 13-year-old boy probably terrified being forced to kiss a dead child? But here's where it gets even more disturbing. Anatoly wrote that he didn't just kiss her once. He kissed her once, then again, and then the girl's mother did something that defies all logic. She put a wedding ring on Anatoly's finger and then placed a matching ring on her dead daughter's finger. She married a 13-year-old boy to her dead child. Now you might be thinking, this sounds impossible. Surely this is the delusion of a disturbed mind. But remember, this was Soviet Russia in 1979. Superstitions ran deep, especially in smaller communities. Death rituals could be unusual. Anatoly himself said this strange marriage was useful. It directed his entire life's path toward studying death, cemeteries, and the occult. But here's what I need you to remember as we continue this story. Was this traumatic event the trigger that created a monster? Or was there already something dark inside Anatoly that was simply awakened that day? Keep that question in mind, because by the end of this video, you'll have to decide for yourself. Fast forward to adulthood. Anatoly Moskvin has become everything you'd expect from a brilliant academic. He speaks 13 languages fluently. He's a respected journalist. He teaches Celtic studies at Nizhny Novgorod Linguistic University. His colleagues call him a genius, though they admit he's eccentric. He works for a newspaper called Necrologies, and yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. A publication focused entirely on obituaries, cemeteries, and dead people. The perfect job for someone with Anatoly's particular interests. He becomes an expert in Celtic history and folklore. He even coins a term for himself, necropolist, an expert on cemeteries. Now, to his peers, this all seems perfectly academic. After all, death studies are a legitimate field. Anthropologists study burial customs. Historians research ancient civilizations through their treatment of the dead, but there's something they don't know about their brilliant colleague. Something that's been growing in the darkness for decades. While they see a respected professor, Anatoly is already planning something that will shock the world. You see, his interest in the dead isn't purely academic anymore. Remember that marriage to the dead girl when he was 13? Well, Anatoly never forgot about it. In fact, he's been thinking about it every single day for over 20 years, and now he's about to do something about it. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever walked through a cemetery at night? Have you ever felt like you were being watched? Well, in the cemeteries around Nizhny Novgorod, that feeling would have been absolutely correct, because starting in the late 1990s, someone was watching, someone was taking notes, someone was choosing. 2009. Families across the Nizhny Novgorod region start making horrifying discoveries. When they visit the graves of their loved ones, many of them children. They find something impossible. Empty graves, not vandalized, not ransacked, professionally excavated. The bodies simply gone. Can you imagine? You go to visit your child's grave, maybe on their birthday or the anniversary of their death, and you discover their body has been stolen. At first, people assume it's grave robbers looking for jewelry or valuables. But that theory doesn't hold up. Nothing valuable is missing. Only the bodies. Then authorities start thinking it might be an extremist organization, some kind of cult or terrorist group. After all, who else would have the organization and motivation to dig up dozens of graves? For 2 years, this theory persists. Police are looking for a network, a conspiracy, a group of people working together. They have no idea they're actually looking for one man who has been perfecting his technique for over a decade. One man who doesn't see what he's doing as theft or desecration. One man who believes he's rescuing abandoned children. But here's what makes this story even more chilling. While all this is happening, while families are discovering empty graves and police are searching for an organization of grave robbers, Anatoly Moskvin is living his normal life. He's teaching his university classes. He's writing articles for necrologies. He's having dinner with his parents, and in their shared apartment in plain sight, he's displaying his trophies. His parents see them every day. His mother even comments on how talented he is at making such large, detailed dolls. 26 of them. 26 life-sized figures sitting around their small apartment. Some positioned as if watching television, others arranged as if they're having conversations, all of them with faces covered in thick fabric. All of them with button eyes so they can watch cartoons with Anatoly. All of them containing music boxes in their chests that play lullabies when touched. His parents think it's just a hobby. They have no idea they're living in a mausoleum. November 2nd, 2011. Everything changes because of a terrorist attack that has nothing to do with Anatoly Moskvin. A bombing at Moscow's Domodedovo airport kills 37 people and injures over 100. Russia goes into high alert mode, especially regarding anything that might be connected to extremist activity. Someone reports that Muslim graves are being desecrated in local cemeteries. Given the heightened security concerns, police respond in full force. They're expecting to find evidence of organized terrorism. What they find instead is a lone figure in a cemetery, a middle-aged man with wild hair, mumbling to himself as he works by moonlight. Anatoly Moskvin. When they arrest him, he doesn't resist. He doesn't seem surprised. In fact, he seems almost relieved. But the real shock comes when police search his apartment. Remember, they're still thinking this might be connected to terrorism or organized crime. They're preparing for the worst. They knock on the door of a tiny apartment. An elderly couple answers. Anatoly's parents. They're confused, frightened. They insist their son is just an academic, a bit eccentric but harmless. The parents lead the police inside, and that's when they see them. 26 life-sized figures positioned throughout the small space. At first, the officers think they're just dolls. Creepy, yes. Unusual, definitely, but not criminal. Then one of the officers touches one. Music plays. A soft, childlike melody emanates from inside the figure's chest. Another officer notices something about the proportions. These aren't quite right for dolls. The bone structure underneath the fabric wrapping seems too real, too anatomically correct. And then they start to uncover the faces. What they find underneath that thick fabric will haunt every person in that apartment for the rest of their lives. These aren't dolls. These are mummified human bodies. Young girls and women, perfectly preserved, turned into grotesque parodies of life. 26 stolen daughters, turned into playthings. The parents collapse. The officers are physically sick. And Anatoly? Anatoly calmly begins to explain. What do you say when police discover you've been living with 26 mummified bodies for over a decade? If you're Anatoly Moskvin, you explain that these aren't bodies, they're your children. In court, Anatoly is eerily calm. He cooperates with investigators, answers their questions, shows them his detailed instructions on mummification using salt and baking soda. But he's not apologetic. In his mind, he hasn't committed a crime. He's performed a rescue operation. You see, Anatoly had always wanted children. He'd applied to adoption agencies multiple times, but they'd rejected him due to his low income. So he found another way to become a father. He tells the court, "You abandoned your girls, I brought them home and warmed them up." Remember his expertise in Celtic culture? He uses that knowledge to justify his actions. Ancient druids, he explains, would sleep on graves to commune with the spirits of the dead. He claims he did the same thing before each grave robbery. He would lie on the grave and have conversations with the dead children, asking for their permission to dig them up if they wanted to live again. And according to Anatoly, they all said yes. They all wanted to come home with him. Once he brought them home, he didn't just hide them away. He integrated them into his life. He celebrated their birthdays. He watched cartoons with them. That's why he gave them button eyes, so they could see. He held holiday parties with all 26 of his children, and he was waiting for science or magic to advance enough to bring them back to life properly. When asked if he knew he was committing a crime, Anatoly said yes. But in his mind, saving these abandoned children from death was more important than following the law. This wasn't madness to him, this was love. But here's the question that haunts me. How does someone hide this level of delusion for so long? How do you live with your parents, maintain a professional career, and interact with society while secretly believing you're caring for 26 resurrected children? The answer is more terrifying than you might think. Initially, Anatoly was charged with desecration of graves and dead bodies crimes that would have carried only a 5-year sentence. But during the mandatory psychiatric evaluation, doctors diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. In May 2012, he was committed to a psychiatric hospital. 3 years later, doctors declared him cured and recommended his release. A judge disagreed. He remains in psychiatric care with evaluations every 6 months. Natalia Chardimova, whose 10-year-old daughter Olga was one of the 26 dolls, said it best. "This creature brought fear, terror, and panic into my life. I would be happy to know he will spend his life in the hospital. He is a sick person. But here's what keeps me awake at night about this case. For years, maybe decades, Anatoly's parents lived in that apartment. They saw those 26 figures every day. They thought it was just their son's hobby. His colleagues worked with him. They knew he was eccentric, but they respected his intellect. His editors published his articles about death and cemeteries, never questioning why he was so fascinated by these topics. How many people are living double lives right now? How many neighbors, colleagues, or even family members are hiding darkness behind a facade of normalcy or even brilliance? The story of Anatoly Moskvin forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of mental illness, the masks we all wear, and the darkness that can hide behind even the most brilliant minds. 26 families will never fully recover from what he did to their daughters. His parents will never forget the horror of discovering what they'd been living with. And somewhere in a psychiatric facility, Anatoly Moskvin continues to believe he was saving abandoned children. What do you think? Was this the result of a traumatic childhood experience? Or was there something fundamentally wrong with Anatoly from the beginning? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the most normal. If you want to see more true crime cases, don't forget to like and subscribe. There are plenty more dark stories waiting to be told.